In a yard in Virginia, steel is already being cut for a carrier that will not reach the fleet until the middle of the 2030s. When this story starts, her keel has not been laid. Her structural units are moving through fabrication anyway. Go looking through her drawings for a steam line, and you will not find one anywhere on the ship. The designers did not move steam somewhere else. They took it off her. And in August 2026, an order arrived telling that ship to put it back. 60 days to produce the plan. Pull out the electromagnetic catapults. Pull out the electromagnetic weapons elevators. Hand the Doris Miller the machinery the Nimitz class sailed with. The instruction exists on paper. When it landed, nothing had been pulled out of anything. Read quickly, it sounds like a fleet walking back an expensive bet. The record gives that reading something to stand on. These systems have run well short of their own reliability targets, and the schedule absorbed the difference for years. But you cannot walk back to a place you have never stood. That is the trap sitting quietly inside the order, and it turns the whole argument from a matter of preference into a question about the hull itself. Can you pull the energy architecture out of a ship and still have the same ship at the other end? There are Ford-class hulls still unbuilt behind this one, and whatever is decided for the fourth ship becomes the pattern every ship after her inherits, which is the kind of decision Navy Decoded exists to take apart, one system at a time, before anyone gets around to telling you what to think of it. Stay to the end, and you will see why "go back" may not describe anything that exists. Judge this order by the industry that has to carry it out, not by the office it came from. Roughly 82% of the warships currently under construction in the United States are behind schedule. Delay is the baseline the whole industry works from, and underneath it sits the constraint money cannot fix quickly. The industry employs about 105,000 people, and the next decade calls for 200,000 more. You cannot buy schedule if there is no one to hold the welding torch. Into that picture arrives an order aimed at the design of a single ship, but lateness is not this ship's private problem. Every carrier in the class carries it. The Gerald R. Ford arrived more than 2 years behind schedule and north of $13 billion. The John F. Kennedy will take 16 years from first steel to delivery. The Enterprise slipped from 2028 to 2031, and the Doris Miller from February 2032 to February 2034. 4 hulls, 4 delays, 1 order aimed at the machinery on 1 flight deck. So is that machinery really the largest lever available? 4 systems answer that. 2 the order wants gone, 2 it wants back in their place. We start with the one named first. A catapult has one job, and it is a brutal one. Take 80,000 pounds of aircraft with a human being inside it from a dead stop to flying speed in 300 feet of deck. The electromagnetic system does that with a linear induction motor, an ordinary electric motor sliced open along its length and unrolled flat. 2 stator beams run down the track, and between them rides an aluminum plate 22 feet long. Energize the coils in sequence, and a magnetic field walks down the rail, carrying the plate with it. Nothing touches anything. The whole machine is a field and a plate, and the field pulls the plate until the aircraft is flying. Hall sensors read that plate's position the entire way, so thrust is trimmed while the launch is still happening. The catapult knows what it is pulling, and it knows now. That matters least at the heavy end. Look at the light end instead. An unmanned tanker does not need slightly less force than a loaded fighter. It needs a different curve entirely, soft enough not to work fatigue into a thinner airframe. That dial decides what this ship is allowed to launch for the next 30 years, in exactly the decade the fleet began putting uncrewed aircraft on decks. Then the harder problem, and it is the one that ends up mattering most. The motor wants more than 60 megawatts in 2 to 3 seconds. Close to half the entire electrical output of the ship, drawn in a single gulp once every 45 seconds. No grid survives that, so the energy is borrowed early and held in spinning flywheels between shots, and it puts more behind a launch than steam pressure ever could. And the storage is where the trouble lives. Each catapult has flywheels of its own, but the storage groups and the inverters are wired together across the whole installation. Call it the shared bus. 4 catapults, 1 electrical spine. When one catapult fails, the crew cannot cut it out of the circuit and work on it while the other 3 keep launching. And spinning the machinery down safely takes an hour and a half. A fault in one corner of the flight deck stops all of it. The reliability record says the same thing in numbers. The requirement is 4,166 cycles between mission failures. Early testing measured 181. By fiscal year 2021, 460. Through mid-2022, 614. Climbing steadily, and still most of an order of magnitude short of the number written into the design. Which raises a question worth carrying forward. When a system is built to do more things, does it necessarily acquire more ways to break? That is what the order wants gone. So what would take its place, and does that one deserve its reputation for rugged simplicity? The steam catapult that served the Nimitz class is the C-13. Its track runs 324 feet, and the task is identical, 80,000 pounds to 140 knots in 309 feet. Its energy conversion efficiency is about 5%. That number misleads. 5% does not mean a weaker launch. The same aircraft goes flying. On a nuclear ship, heat is the one thing there is plenty of. What poor efficiency buys is a bill. Steam, fresh water, volume, and people to tend all three. The waste never shows on the flight deck. It shows in the compartments underneath it. Now let us look at what the machine actually is. Two free pistons run in parallel cylinders below the deck, joined by a bridge shaped like an inverted letter T. The stem of that T comes up through a slot cut along the flight deck and drags the shuttle, which means the pressure vessel has a gash in its wall, 300 feet long. The answer is a flexible steel strip. A cam lifts it clear as the shuttle passes and presses it back down immediately behind, and the steam pressure inside is what forces the strip into the slot and seals it. The machine uses its own violence to hold itself shut. But at speed, that strip begins to whip, hard enough to jump its groove and dump the entire charge. So the engineers lined 300 feet of slot with ball detents, squeezing inward every inch of the run. Then the stop. The piston is still traveling when the aircraft is gone, so its nose is shaped into spears that drive into water-filled cylinders, 25,000 pounds per square inch in a tenth of a millisecond, braking on the order of 800 times gravity. None of that is simple. It never survived because it was simple. It survived because it is finished. Half a century of hunting down every small demon in it and nailing each one to the deck. And being finished bought something the newer system cannot offer. Each steam catapult is its own machine. When one breaks, sailors open it up and fix it while the other three keep launching. That is the strongest argument standing behind this order, and it is a serious one. What it does not have is a dial. Launch force is set by a rotary valve tuned in advance for each aircraft type, with no feedback once the stroke begins. The machine has two settings, enough and too much, and it asks the ship for a great deal. Every shot burns 1,350 pounds of steam and 125 gallons of fresh water. A day of flying can run through 37,000. Before the first launch, the whole assembly has to soak in heat for hours so the metal does not crack. A steam catapult is a permanent customer of the ship's steam plant, and it never stops drawing. So the question this comparison poses: one system is stronger and far more precise, but when it fails, the whole flight deck stops. The other is cruder and wasteful, but when it fails, you fix that one and the rest keep flying. At sea, which of those has earned the word reliable? Catapults are only half the tempo. The other half lives deep below the deck, and it broke for an entirely different reason. Sortie rate is set as much by how fast ordnance reaches the flight deck as by how fast aircraft leave it. The Ford class rebuilt that half of the tempo too, and it broke for a reason the catapults never had. The Nimitz class weapons elevator is a hydraulic machine. Rams drive wire ropes over winch drums and sheaves to haul the car, and its safeties are pure mechanism. If a rope goes slack, the system locks. If the car runs away, a governor clamps the cable. About 10,500 pounds at 100 feet per minute. The advanced elevator throws the rope away. 11 cars ride on linear synchronous motors. The catapult's physics stood on end. Stators fixed along the trunk walls, permanent magnets wrapping the car, a magnetic wave carrying it upward with nothing holding it from above. 24,000 pounds at 150 feet per minute. More than twice the load, half again the speed. The physics is sound. What broke was tolerance. 4 motors lift each car, one at every corner, and software has to hold their thrust in step within thousandths of a second. Magnetic force only works when the gap between stator and magnet stays inside a very narrow band. But a hull 1,000 feet long flexes as swells pass under it, microscopically and constantly and by design. Engineers call it hull deflection, and it shifts the guide rails a few thousandths of an inch. To a cable elevator, a few thousandths of an inch is nothing at all. To a magnetic gap, it is binding, failed door seals, and control software freezing the car because the numbers have stopped making sense. By the time anyone knew how tight that gap had to be, the steel was welded. The Gerald R. Ford carried 23 first-of-kind systems maturing at once aboard a hull already under construction, and the bill came due on delivery. She went to the fleet with the only path from her magazines to her flight deck out of service, and her 11th car did not pass certification until December 2021, more than 4 years after she was commissioned. The older machinery carries its own bill. Wire ropes corrode and load unevenly as the ship works in a seaway, and hydraulic lines running through armored decks become a fire risk the moment fluid escapes as a mist. Not one of these 4 systems is perfect. They fail in different ways. Then set this against all of it. The Gerald R. Ford, the first ship of the class, the one that paid for every lesson in it, went out on her first full deployment in May 2023 and stayed out 326 days. In that time, the systems everyone calls failures ran more than 11,000 elevator cycles, moved over 1.8 million pounds of ordnance to her flight deck, and put up roughly 8,700 launches. Hold that number against the test figures. At the reliability measured early on, a cruise that size should have gone down close to 50 times. At the best figure yet recorded, more than a dozen. The curve is rising. Slowly, expensively, but rising. And there is a 5th system nobody is talking about. When an aircraft comes aboard, it is stopped by induction motors under digital control, the retarding force tuned to each airframe as it lands, new generation arresting gear, same contractor, same electromagnetic package, and a contributor to the Kennedy's delay. The order says nothing about it. It names the machine that throws aircraft off and the machine that brings ordnance up. The machine that catches them stays exactly as it is. So the question all of this has been building toward: is abandoning the electromagnetic catapult genuinely the sound move? Or is it walking away from a curve just before the part where it steepens? That only means something if the replacement can be done at all. And that is a question about the hull, not about the catapults. The Ford-class hull has no steam distribution system. The 2 A1B reactors generate roughly 3 times the electrical power of the A4W plant in a Nimitz, and distribution runs at 13,800 volts instead of 4,160. That was the bargain. Delete service steam, and reactor manning falls by about half, maintenance demand by 2/3, ship's company from roughly 3,200 to 2,600. Which means going back is not a subtraction, it is an addition. It requires building steam generation, running cross-deck piping to 4 catapult positions, installing accumulators, cylinders, sealing strips, and water breaks with their cooling, and expanding freshwater production enough to feed 37,000 gallons a day, into a hull drawn with no room reserved for any of it. This is a redistribution of volume, weight, center of gravity, and heat load across a design already closed. And the obvious objection arrives right here. When the order landed, the Doris Miller had not been laid down. If no keel exists, how hard can it be to change the drawings? What is frozen is the design, not the steel. The Ford-class drawing set was paid for once and reused across 4 hulls, and that reuse is precisely where the savings were supposed to live. Redesigning the steam architecture for one hull means redesigning the class for that hull alone. And not laid down does not mean not started. The keel laying was set for the end of 2026. Steel cutting had run without interruption, and the manufacturer states that the launch system for this ship, around $1.2 billion worth, is already about half fabricated. The Navy has changed catapult technology before. In the 1950s, it went from hydraulics to steam, and that transition worked cleanly, because the ships were already steamships. What changed was the end device, not the circulatory system. Then there's the supply chain. The last American carrier built with steam catapults was the George H.W. Bush CVN-77, commissioned in 2009, and no new C-13 catapult has been built in nearly 20 years. The tooling, the vendors, and the people who knew the work would have to be rebuilt from nothing. What the order asks to bring back is not merely absent from the ship, it is absent from the country that used to make it. And that leads to the sharpest edge in the whole document. The same order prohibits iterative design changes on mature parent designs because that pattern is exactly what has driven cost growth and delay for years. Pulling the catapults out of the Doris Miller is an iterative design change, and not a small one. The document names the disease and writes the prescription in the same breath. Which invites a quiet question. If going back costs more than going forward, is going back a real option or only a figure of speech? If the 60-day plan is executed as written, the Doris Miller will share a class name, a hull form, and a flight deck with her sisters, and carry a different nervous system underneath. Naval architects have a word for that, and the word is not variant. It is a different class of ship. So if she throws aircraft with steam and lifts bombs on wire rope, does she still hold the title of the most advanced carrier in the world? Or did that title never belong to the flight deck at all, but to the electrical plant beneath it? Here is the strongest objection to all of that. If the ship is already delayed by dock space rather than by catapults, she has to wait anyway. Why not spend the weight on a redesign that costs nothing on the real critical path? Because the weight does not exist. Her keel laying stands, her modules were already being built, and the congestion is in the final assembly area where the Enterprise still sits, the middle of the build, not the front of it. This ship did not start late and sit idle. She started on time and will finish late. But suppose the time were there. Suppose every piece fit the gap perfectly. The result still would not be the fourth Ford-class carrier arriving later. It would be a different ship. Not slower, other. A schedule can be renegotiated. A hull cannot be undesigned. And what bled the Ford class was never electromagnetics. It was the habit of committing to what had not yet been proven, then paying for it in every redesign made after the metal had cooled. This order sees that cost clearly. Then it asks for one more redesign, on a scale this class has not been handed before. None of this is settled. What the order created is a deadline for a plan, and a plan is a long way from steel. Between the paper and the ship stand a redesign nobody has drawn, a supply chain nobody has rebuilt, and a bill nobody has agreed to pay. But the answer does not change the shape of the question. An order told a ship to return to something she never had. You can tear the nervous system out of a vessel and lay in a different one. With enough years and enough money, that is engineering, not sorcery. What you cannot do is finish that work and still have the same ship. Choose what carries energy through a hull, and you have chosen the shape of everything else inside her. Reliability is bought with time. 50 years turned the steam catapult from a machine crawling with small demons into something a sailor can fix with a wrench in the middle of an ocean. Electromagnetic launch has walked a short stretch of that road, and the numbers say it is still walking. Forget which system is better today. The question is whether a country still has the patience to let a technology finish growing up, or whether, every time the curve rises too slowly, we go back to the starting line and begin counting again. 60 days for a plan. Then somebody decides what the Doris Miller is.